This is Dr. Karen, and you are listening to the Facto Leaders podcast, where I help pediatric therapists and educators become better leaders so they can make a bigger impact with their services. With over 15 years of experience supporting school-age kids with diverse learning needs, I'll share up-to-date evidence-based practices, my own experiences, and guest interviews designed to help clinicians, teachers, and aspiring school leaders feel more confident in the way they serve their students and clients. I'll cover a range of topics designed to help you support students' emotional and academic growth and set kids up for success in adulthood, including how to support language, literacy, executive functioning, as well as how to help IEP teams working together to support kids across the day. Whether you want to learn more effective strategies for your therapy sessions or classroom, be a more influential leader on your team, or find creative ways to use your skills to advance in your career, I've got you covered. Hey everybody, it's Dr. Karen, and welcome to episode 113 of the De Facto Leaders podcast. I am so excited about this interview today with Cassandra Williams from Educational Innovation 360. I've been doing a lot of work and research over the last year on finding ways to effectively serve school districts and really trying to figure out how to format the support that I'm giving, especially when it comes to professional development. This has been something that I've been studying for years because I know that when I was in the schools, it was always frustrating to get access to the mentorship, support, and materials that would help me be good at my job. And I always felt like when I would go to a seminar, I'd get really excited about all of the strategies, but then the support afterwards was always a challenge. So Cassandra and I just, before even recording this interview, have had a lot of conversations about that. So that's why I thought she would be an amazing guest for the show. So to share a little bit about this interview and the topics that we cover. So a lot of people know that supporting language and decoding are important pieces of helping kids grow up to be successful readers. But making it happen is way more complex than that. And you probably know that when it comes to helping kids be literate, there are so many other factors besides what's going on at school and besides what's going on in the classroom when it comes to just actual teaching strategies and intervention strategies. So what happens when we have kids who maybe they're in fifth grade, but they're reading at a first grade reading level, and the teacher is used to teaching fifth grade, and they have to learn to adapt? What if there are other barriers besides just reading getting in the way, such as scheduling constraints, classroom management issues, or just access to mentoring for the teacher? What if kids don't have access to books outside of school or other community resources, and schools don't have the funding to provide teachers and students with quality reading materials that they can take home or use in their classrooms? I wanted to get into all of these questions, and that's why I invited Cassandra to come on the show. Cassandra is a true innovator in the education field, having dedicated over 25 years of her life to revolutionizing existing systems and setting new standards of excellence. She has a degree in elementary education from Southern Illinois University and a master's from California State University, and she is the founder of 2 successful elementary schools in Indianapolis. Her research has focused on coaching teachers to accelerate student achievement, often utilizing video and other technologies as learning tools. And her most recent passion is the Educational Innovation 360 e-instructional coaching system, which she designed and developed in 2018. So some of the key takeaways that we discuss in this conversation are things like, what are teachers struggling with when it comes to teaching reading, and do they always know where they need support? And this is not just teachers, this would be anyone who's providing intervention and instruction. We also talk about how to make school libraries and district events more inclusive and culturally responsive to the communities that they're serving. We also discuss how we can make schools more inviting to parents so that they can take an active role in their children's education, especially if we're not really sure what kind of experiences they've had when it came to their own education. And then finally, we wrap up by discussing 3 essential components of effective professional development and why many workshops only address one of these components. So if you've ever felt like you weren't getting the support that you need when it comes to professional development, then you're definitely going to want to stick around for the entire conversation to learn about how you can connect with Cassandra, as well as a couple of my own resources that I'm going to be mentioning throughout this episode. So for now, please enjoy this interview with educational consultant Cassandra Williams. Today, I'm joined by Cassandra Williams from Education Innovation 360. So thank you so much for being here with me today.
Very excited to be here with you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, I know that we have so much we could talk about, and we've already had many discussions peer-to-peer just about business and education and all the fun things. So I'm really excited to chat today. So why don't you start off by just telling us a little bit about you? What's your background? How did you get to where you are now? And what are you currently doing?
Oh my gosh, that's a lot. Okay. Born and raised in Chicago, moved to LA, started teaching elementary school. Then I became a literacy coach, content expert for District 2. Then you never know where your life is going to end. You know, eventually with your husband or your spouse, you're going to do rock, paper, scissors to figure out whose career you're going to follow. So,
yeah.
So we were following my husband. We were in Kentucky, where I worked as a faculty member supporting teachers and a practitioner approach. I would bring research into the classroom and see what that looked like. And then we moved to Indiana. Indiana, I don't know. I think it's our final destination. I'll let you know.
Yeah.
But in Indiana, I opened 2 schools as an administrator, and I work currently for IUPUI as an adjunct professor in the College of Education, where I get to see kind of current trends, what's going on in education. And then I started my business in 2018, where I support literacy and teachers in the classroom with, culturally relevant pedagogy, literacy, content, management, all the really fun things we love. And so both my opportunity at my job and my business really works with new teachers and support networks and love for learning.
So much there. You have such an interesting experience. So actually, we talked before and we got into what we were doing for our businesses. And I don't think we ever talked about geography. I'm from the Chicago area as well, but from the suburbs. Where in the Chicago area are you from?
Well, okay, I'm from Harvey. People from Chicago say you can't claim the city if you're not in the city. Yeah. So I'm from Harvey.
Okay, yeah, but no, I understand, because that's what I say when I explain where I'm from. Nobody's going to know where Downers Grove or Western Springs or any of those other suburbs are. So yeah, so I'm not technically from Chicago. My dad is, just barely, but
we love you anyway. We love you anyway.
Yeah, I know it's different. And I'm still from Illinois now. And it's so interesting because I live in the center of the state now, and people are like, oh, well, you're from up there. It's all Chicago. So if you're not from the Chicago area, everything is Chicago. And if you are, then nothing is. It's like,
right,
because you're north of I-80 doesn't mean that you're in Chicago. You know what I'm talking about.
Yes, I do. I love it.
Yeah. So, oh man, so many different experiences there. So, okay, where do I start with all of this? You have some great information on your website. I wanted to get to some of those topics, but I'm curious, when you're in there coaching and you're really coaching teachers, and I know that you have a background in literacy. I mean, what are you seeing them need right now? What are the trends?
Wow. So there's a lot of teachers teaching with pieces, and I see incomplete curriculum. I see teachers pay teachers all throughout every piece of the classroom, the halls. And I see teachers really trying hard, but not understanding, I don't even want to say not understanding, not realizing how hard it is for a teacher to go 2 to 3 grade levels down when they've been teaching fifth grade all their life, right? What
Oh,
does
yeah.
it mean to have a child to come into your classroom that is really reading at a maybe first or second grade level and you teach fifth? And I think that is the struggle that I am seeing over and over again. Like, how do I get them to a fifth grade level when I need to work on some of my tools, my scaffolding tools? Like, I need to go back to those classrooms to kind of see what can I do to bring them to the levels. And I think teachers are struggling right now with the creating scaffolds from 2 to 3 grade levels behind to support their students in the grades.
Yeah, that makes that's such an interesting example that you just gave with fifth grade to first grade. When you think about what are you doing in first grade for reading and what are you doing in fifth grade? In fifth grade, you're probably focused on comprehension and
Yes,
inferencing and all of that and
yes,
putting it all together. And if you have a student who can't decode,
right,
well, I mean, you can't just give them more comprehension work.
right. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, that is a big deal. And I think now, since we've had that gap, which it makes me sad because, well, I love literacy, let me just tell you, but it makes me sad that we have done away with other subjects. So
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
seeing full days of literacy. As much as I love reading all day, I think, you know, we already have a 3 hour block of reading for especially like K3. But to make it an all day thing and not to go over different content areas, I think students are struggling, teachers are struggling. They know we have to fill the gap, but some teachers are like concerned, how do we fill that gap? And sometimes leadership are not the best people to go and say, hey, how do I fill the gap and do this and do this? So I think teachers are struggling in silence.
Yeah. Do you think that the leaders are just so overloaded that they just don't realize all these different, very specific things that are going on?
They are. And even some of the principals that I've, worked with, they're just kind of like, look, we are too getting beat by these test scores. We have to meet our expectations. We have to walk our classroom. We have to do evaluations. And, they're overwhelmed with their paperwork too, trying to get everything in with
Yeah.
COVID and the rules. So I think they are overwhelmed. And then I think that was one reason why I started my program too, was it was very hard to be a building leader and an instructional coach. So those were two different roles that principals had to carry. How do you go deep with a teacher when you're really struggling to support 20 or 30 people on your staff? So that's why coaching was so important.
Yeah, that's really interesting because just when you think about all the different places that a principal's head is, depending on it's interesting because I'm in central Illinois. A lot of the districts are smaller, so they don't necessarily have the same hierarchy where there's an assistant principal and a principal. And I've seen where sometimes there's an assistant principal who's more of an operations person, and then there's a principal who's more of a big vision person. Well, if you don't have both of those roles, you have to do both. And it's like the employee evaluation is the IEP for school principals.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think
Mm-hmm.
people realize that. And, you're sitting there, and I can just remember going through my evaluation with my principal, and it's kind of like boom, 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 get it done.
Yep. Yep.
And that's, like I
Yeah.
I get it. They have so many of them to do. It's overwhelming, and it almost felt like the actual feedback came in the unstructured things once we were done with the checking off the boxes of what we had to do.
Yes, yes. And it's unfortunate because I want to say, I can say it to myself, like teachers are people pleasers and we want to do well. And we want to know that we're doing well. And we get that, like that thrill, that validation when the principal says, I really like that you took your time on whatever. But, since principals are overwhelmed, I'm not seeing as much as that as I would like to. And, some teachers are like, look, I'm not validated. I want to be in a collaborative space. And so we're kind of moving in different directions. So
Yeah.
that's all.
Okay, so I have a couple different thoughts where this conversation can go. So I'm thinking there's programming operating procedures, there's instructional coaching, and then there's the tools and the materials. Because it's like, so people are using teachers pay teachers,
Yeah.
and are they using quality materials in
Yes.
their libraries, their reading materials, their books? That's probably the number one thing people ask me about. And of course that's important, but then what if you don't have the right schedule and services and the right structure, and then the right person to coach you to do all of those things? So I feel like
Yeah.
we could just go there one at a time. So if we go to the programming operating procedures type of thing, you have an article on your website about block scheduling, and you were mentioning
Mm.
the issue of how we are going away from teaching these other subjects. I mean, not just the science, the social studies, but then these other vocational subjects. And obviously kids need to learn how to read and do math.
Geography and everything else that
Yeah,
comes
I
with
mean,
it. Yeah.
oh my gosh, I can't tell you how embarrassing it is to play Trivial Pursuit because of the stuff that I don't know. I mean, besides that, just for functional reasons in life, of why you should know things. So,
Yeah.
um, I'd love to know your thoughts on block scheduling, how it can be used to try to solve that problem, what you've seen done.
Yeah. So it is what it is. We all have to do block scheduling, make sure we get our recess in, all the subjects. But I think, we are competing with, our digital natives, right? And they
Yeah,
are tech happy and they love tech, and rightfully so. We can incorporate tech, but I think the attention span has changed with a lot of our students. So
yeah.
a lot of the things I've been advocating, well, we know we have to have a 3 hour block, but what does that look like in small chunks? And
Mhm.
it used to be this concept of you double their age and that's the amount of time they can sit or, be in a certain space. But now
Yeah.
I'm saying, take their age, maybe add 5 to 10 minutes to that, and then think of what transition you could do. You move from the carpet to the board to centers to spaces, outside, whatever it takes, to kind of keep them engaged. Of course, we know total physical response, hand movement, gestures, call and response, songs, dances. How do we incorporate current trends, Twitter, Instagram, even TikTok into our classroom to
Yeah.
really keep students engaged? And for those small chunks, I'm talking about maybe 20 minutes max of chunks of content, to move the classroom to still keep things going.
So you're saying that even if you have this big block of time that is your reading time, it's not 90 minutes of the same thing. It's just arranged a little bit differently. Instead
Yeah.
of saying every 40 minutes or every 30 minutes, we're going to go to a different block.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And I even think that once we kind of get in the hang of this, now we can think about differentiating instruction. Like when a student shows up, where do they go? Or maybe they're doing small groups right in the beginning of the day, or maybe they're meeting with your aide, or maybe you're doing whole group, but it's a quick check-in. Maybe you're flipping the classroom. I think I would love to see more of that, learning content across, the curriculum, and is not just, ELA. So thinking of how do we support independent learning and individualized learning and use technology in a way that will benefit us all. But I think we're not there yet. So I
Yeah.
think that is the future. We're not there yet. That does take some work to get in place, but I do believe that, we're changing, and we kind of have to change with what, the world.
Yeah. So how do you see people doing things so let's say that you have students who need those skills where they are very specific academic skills. It feels like, and it's kind of hard to tell when you're seeing people's social media posts and headlines, what they really think about things. But sometimes it almost seems like people are going away from that. And I think that is, I mean, you can't argue that having literacy skills and being able to read and write is going to serve you vocationally and in your life. I mean, you can't go away from that, but it almost seems like there's this shift to where we're going away from that. But at the same time, if you're only doing that, I do see the argument of we need to have real life experiences in school. We can't just, have kids in school all year round and have them just, not doing anything, any variety of activities, and then just going to summer camp for a week in the summer and calling that, a varied experience. Like, how do we integrate that all year round and get those reading skills in?
I think it just takes just unique approaches. But I do believe we still need the 5, the components of reading, right? We still need to incorporate that and to a T. And I think you're right. I do think we've kind of gone away from that, but I would love to bring it back and to just bring back new ideas, new strategies, but we still need the strategies that we've had in place for years. Phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, all those great things. But I do think that there's been a breakdown, especially in vertical and horizontal planning.
Yeah.
Like, I don't see that as much anymore. And we're kind of fending for ourselves in the classroom. It's unfortunate. It's the reality. And teachers do the best they can in any situation.
Yeah. Can you explain what you mean by vertical and horizontal planning? I mean, are you talking more about the scheduling and programming aspect?
I think more I'm talking about like what happens in first grade, what happens in second grade.
Oh, yeah.
What happens in third grade to like what happens across the second grade. I do think we're meeting, but we're not really talking we don't do the same thing. We close our doors and we're just on our own path.
Yeah.
And so
that's when you hear where it's so interesting, where it's like kids get to third grade and and they're like, well, what are you guys doing at second grade? What's happening here? And it seems like there's this big gap, and vice versa. I've noticed that, especially when kids change buildings, it's like, what are they doing over there?
Yep. And it's the blame game.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I hate that. But then also you've got to have across the grade level where you find that people are doing different things at the same grade level. So how can you even answer that question of what are we doing here in second grade or whatever grade you're talking about? Oh, different things. I think what people don't realize is that with the reading instruction, I hate when it's like you hear this message of people act like you're torturing kids by teaching them to read. It's like, oh my gosh, it's okay to ask kids to be uncomfortable. I was listening to a literacy podcast the other day, and someone said, there's this whole idea of like being engaged versus having fun, that you don't have to be, it doesn't always have to be, quote, fun for it to be engaged. Sometimes we're engaged in something, or we're doing something that's beneficial, that's going to make us feel good about ourselves and confident, that isn't necessarily fun.
Yes.
Like we're not necessarily being entertained. And maybe that's actually the key to like a more fulfilling life. So,
And then we do push our kids, right? We have the carrot and the stick. We know about zone of proximal development. We understand that it has to be a little challenging. And, it's not always fun, right? But it is going to be a challenge. And, a lot of our teachers are in the grind of the everyday, just trying. And so I love that they're really trying. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing with literacy is that I don't think people realize that a little bit goes a long way. You don't have to do phonemic awareness for 90 minutes. You can do it for 20 minutes, 3 times a week. And that makes a big difference. And then you can do your other stuff too. Your more project-based things, play-based, all your other stuff.
You can. Okay. And I love, you're right. You can. And it can be fun too, Yeah. So I love it.
Okay. So we're talking a lot about the scheduling aspect. So then there's the coaching aspect, but with the leaders and the services that you provide. Actually, why don't we wrap up with that? Because that's what you provide. So you have a lot of experience there, but I'm curious what other things need to be in place as far as materials, like, so you have an article about transforming school libraries. I'm curious what kinds of things, when we're thinking about the materials that teachers have within those blocks, when we're thinking about books and just offering kids a diverse range of exposure to things, what are some things that you would recommend from that end?
So I really believe you need to bring in the community. You have to talk to the parents and the families, because they can add so much to your library, to your experience, and to the kids' experience. There was one time we had parents come in to like do poetry. But like I said, it's a team effort. It can't just be you alone in the classroom inviting the parent. Usually if the principal's on the board and the librarian is on board, you have volunteers, you can have poets, you can have artists, you can, have not a wine and canvas, but a cookies and canvas, whatever it takes to invite the families, invite the communities. But with that, the library is kind of the gatekeeper for knowledge. And you think of like what books are it's one thing to have the books on how we have them on the shelves to display all of this stuff, but it's another thing to have books come alive, like students come in and they're intense. Now it does take a little funding, but I think for a librarian to think outside of the box and think about how we can best support our students, how we could best support our teachers, and just have a collaborative effort in really pushing the needle when it comes to literacy. But I think it does take a collaborative effort. And then, as teachers and going out of your pocket, a lot of our materials and our books are very expensive and they're very precious to us. So, when we do anything with diversity, equity, or inclusion, you have to celebrate your wins. And whenever there's a win, celebrate that, because sometimes it's very small and minute. You have to celebrate that and embrace that, because sometimes when we change things on a massive level, it takes baby steps. So if you want to change your library, or you want to invite families in, you're going to have more people on board. But I do think any win is a win in the right direction. So
yeah, it almost sounds like you're saying that, I know that sometimes there's these book lists where it's like, if you want to address these things or these issues, have these books in your library. And of course that's helpful, but then I always wonder with those types of things, how do you know that's going to be relevant to your community? I mean, it's probably good to use that as a starting point, but if you don't get feedback and you don't have a process for continuing that to make sure that everybody feels like you're including things that are relevant to them.
Yes. A culture day, of course, that's the go-to, right? Something we do, but how do we incorporate the library? How can a librarian be a part of that? How can we draw on different things? How can we go and contact the big library in town to bring in materials, artifacts, resources? There's so much that we can do. But I think it does take a lot of work. And so, yeah.
Oh, yeah. With the library, so there's a couple different things that I've heard as far as buzzwords, topics. So there's on one end, the idea that if you just give kids access to books, they'll learn to read, which obviously we know that isn't true. They do need the phonics instruction, but we also do need to give them access to books, because that almost seems more like it's like an identity, a cultural, a habitual thing. So,
I agree.
Yeah.
And sometimes I see that the books are kind of captive of the space. So you can check these out. You can check them out to your classroom, but they don't go home. And I think, again, I feel like, wow, we can't take it home and share the knowledge or share literature. So some schools, they take it home, you lose them, it's okay, we got funding to replace. But there's some schools that are like, you take it to your classroom and it goes no further and you cannot take it home. So I think it really, it's just like, what message are we sending to certain schools, and who has access and who just doesn't. So,
Is that, do they have those policies because they don't want to lose the books? I mean, is it just because they have limited funding and they're like, we need to keep track of everything because we only have so many?
Both, and right. So, I go in fluent schools and I see, books for everybody. They could take it home. If they lose it, sometimes parents donate, sometimes parents, they can't afford it, but they have funds, right? They allocate funds. And then there's other schools who like, hey, this is our library and all the books stay at school. You cannot take, you cannot take your social studies book home, or your basal reader or whatever you're using, you cannot take it home. And it's just like, wow, okay, we're there now. What do you do?
Yeah. I'm going to take a quick break here and talk a little bit about the School of Clinical Leadership, my program for related service providers who want to take a leadership role in implementing executive functioning support. Some of the things that are coming up in this conversation are the need for mentoring across the day and the need to support educators in implementing strategies in their classrooms, not just through one-time trainings, but ongoing support. Many times, if we are going to change the practices and provide support for people who are supporting kids, that training and support needs to be ongoing. So if you are in a position where you are providing services for kids in the school setting, your role can go beyond just providing direct therapy. This is obviously a powerful part of what you do, but you can make an even bigger impact if you can figure out how to provide support across the day for students as well as the staff supporting students. And when you're thinking about executive functioning, it's essential that that support be across the day. And I show you how to do that in the School of Clinical Leadership. This is a program for people who are in a related service provider role and who want to emerge as leaders on their team when it comes to providing behavioral, mental health, and academic supports across students' day. So if you are a speech pathologist, a social worker, a psychologist, a counselor, an occupational therapist, and you're seeing that your students aren't generalizing because they're not getting supports across the day because services feel siloed off, and you want to help your team start working together to support kids, then this program is for you. To learn more about the School of Clinical Leadership, you're going to want to go to drkarendudek-brannan.com/clinical leadership. Now, let's get back to the interview. Yeah, I mean, what are some different options that you've seen to get around that issue of just making sure that people have access to books? Like if you can't take your books home, but you want to get the families involved and make sure that that's a part of their home environment, but then you're not letting them take the books home because again, you're thinking about your limitations and you want to make sure that you have resources for your classroom. Right. I mean, what do we do about that?
I do not have answers for everything. Let me just say,
I guess it's good to just know that it's an issue.
Yeah, it is. And I think I'm a learner too. And I do know that sometimes, when families are involved or when families understand this is issue, you never know how people come and show up and how they can support. But with that being said, I don't have all the answers. I wish I did. I wish I can, wave a magic wand and say, hey, we need to do better, right? But it kind of is what it is, and we do the best we can in our schools and our spaces.
Yeah. It's so interesting when you look at these, the philanthropies and things like that, and you wonder, okay, how can I donate my time, my energy, my resources to causes like this and figure out, I don't know if you watch the show Adam Ruins Everything. Have you ever seen that show?
No. Oh, no.
Okay,
no.
So it's all myth busting. I think the very first episode that he ever did was the why are diamonds valuable and like why are engagement rings so expensive, and it was a marketing campaign. It's like they just told us that diamonds were valuable, so we believed it, and now we'll pay more for them. So that's probably the most famous episode, but he had this one about food banks and how people are like, oh, I have these expired canned goods, let me donate them to the food bank. And it's like, why would you be giving that to people, And he looked into what actually is helpful if you want to serve your community. And he said the most helpful thing you can do for the food bank is just donate funds so that they can get what they need, because then because they know what they need for their community. And I think volunteering time, that might have been something too. That's something you can do. So I wonder how that applies to books and libraries, where it's, do you donate your old books? Do you donate funds for them to get more books? I would think that it would be dependent on your community, but probably shouldn't donate your books that are falling apart.
Right.
Like the canned good things, like people think, oh, I'm helping, and it's like,
I totally agree. And then I think too, it kind of reminds me of when I was a teacher, we would always have, I worked in an urban school, and we would always have these fundraisers for students that were struggling. And I'm like, well, we're struggling. So it's like donating, like taking from the poor and giving to the poor. Like, parents would tell me I don't have any canned goods to donate. And I'm like, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. But my child will feel left out if they're not a part of the giving. Right. And so, we just have to be mindful of our population that we serve, and believe that they will show up in various ways if we include them. But what I'm seeing now is we are not even including them. We let them know something on parent-teacher conference and open house, but we don't fully engage them in the learning experience and what we're learning, what struggles we're having. We need to really embrace our families and even kind of see what they do, how we can highlight their services, how wrap around supports for our kids. I think if we really truly engaged our families, I think they will show up much further than, like I said, than right now what we have.
Do you think that people either don't feel welcome or don't know what resources they have available to them? I mean, are those two things that come up?
So, right, who are the gatekeepers? Who's the one at the front door? And, I wouldn't feel welcome either if I spoke Spanish, but there's nothing translated on the walls or anything, or the receptionist doesn't speak Spanish, right? Or, you're watching something like Fox News in the waiting room, right? So just thinking of how we show up as schools, and just kind of being like extending ourselves. So I don't know what it is. It could be both and. That teach, people that come up, they don't feel welcome or that they're heard. And then we don't include them. Mm-hmm. We don't reach out to them before school starts. We don't get outside of the bubble and meet them where they are in different spaces, right? Why do we have to have parent-teacher conference at the school? Maybe we can have it at another space, or like a social event at another space. I just think we are so rigid in the way we do things. We're not willing to do things differently to serve a just different generation and population.
Yeah. I think that's so interesting how we make judgments about about people's parenting, about what they think about education, because they didn't show up to a parent-teacher conference, or they didn't come to this event, or they didn't do this, they didn't sign the form, or the whatever. It's like, there's so many different reasons that did or didn't happen. Like, are they working 3 jobs? Do they speak the language? Did they have a bad experience at school and they want to be involved in their kids' education, but it's not an environment they're comfortable or know how to navigate?
I love it, because I know a friend of mine opened the school in Michigan, and they surveyed the parents, were like, what would you like to see the school do? And a lot of the parents said, give us jobs.
Oh,
and out of everything, he was not expecting that. So he was like, oh, we'll do fundraisers. So what he did was identify some of the local businesses and said, hey, if you're looking to hire, would you be willing to hire our parents on the spot? We would love to. And he got about 10 businesses to come and set up in the gym. And then they had parent-teacher conference. And they said, dress your best because there's interviews on the spot. He said that was the biggest parent-teacher conference. They had babysitting on site, and they had, interviews on site. Parents got hired, and a couple of parents ended up working and volunteering for the school, right? So we have to really think about, one, how do we serve the families that we support the kids, but how do we really truly serve the families? And I thought that was a brilliant example of how we can best survey the families or figure out what do they need and incorporate that into the school.
Wow, that's such a great story. Like, I mean, just, I never would have thought to ask that. If you just leave it open and ask people, I mean, you have so many assumptions about what you think people need.
Yep. And like I said, I've heard multiple, like, just innovative ways people are doing things, like we had a transient population in Los Angeles. We partnered with the local Motel 8. We were able to get hotel rooms on a dime, no questions asked, right? And so just thinking about our partnerships, our connections, and our communities and how we can best help them, because if we help them, they will do so much more for us that, they too want to see their child do well, and they know we love their children. But like I said, they will go the extra mile if they see that we're doing whatever it takes to make sure that their students are successful.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. So like it sounds like when you come in as an instructional coach, and that's where I thought this conversation was going to go, but there's so much more to it. I mean, so you almost have to tell the teachers, like, how do you teach reading? What's effective instruction for teaching kids to decode? But also they, in the back of their mind, probably have to be there maybe has to be some coaching on this kind of thing as well.
Right. So I don't really go in with that. I'm a learner first, right? I go and observe. So they show me their classroom, they show me what's going on, and then I ask questions. And then based on the things that they want to, of course, first, when I walk in their classroom, I look and see on the shelves, what are they studying? What are they learning? What do they want to learn? And then I get that from them. And then based on where they want to go, I help get them there. And I pull out some resources or, do the research and figure out who's doing something similar to that and get models for them to, and I break it up like we scaffold. I break it up. It's like, hey, if you want to do that, here's the way to start. Let's do this first and let's try to incorporate it, see if it works and tailor it to our classroom. But that's pretty much what I do when I work with teachers. I listen, I learn, and then I take their idea, break it up into scaffolds. And it's mostly about what they want, but then it's a little about what they need. If I see they need classroom management, I'm like, oh, okay, in order to get there, we have to get this down first. And I just give them baby steps necessary on what they need. And then I basically kind of see what the whole group, what all the teachers are struggling on. And then the professional development at the school site is based on the needs of the school, as opposed to me just going and doing a PD and it not being relevant,
Yeah. So when you're trained as a school administrator, is this whole idea of scaffolding for your staff and scaffolding in the way that you support your staff, is that something that was part of your training, or is that something that you've had to go above and beyond and learn about?
No, I think, Karen, we do that as teachers.
Yeah.
Right? If you are a teacher, you can break the hardest content material up into baby steps. If you can do that, you can pretty much teach anybody anything. So it wasn't in my training. Most of my administrative training was like, hey, how do we budget? How do we balance? How do we make partnerships? And how do we keep the building down, like hold things down at the building. So it wasn't about like thinking outside the box or creating scaffolds for people who struggle, or even creating a teacher pipeline for how do we get new teachers. Like, it wasn't on that. I think with teachers, we're so innovative and we could do so many things. And so that's a skill that a lot of people don't have if they, haven't taught. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a lot of people, there's so many different facets of it when it comes to figuring out how to support people who are in the classrooms, because it is the scaffolding and it is a little bit different with adult learners, even though there's so many parallels. And
it is.
It's like, it seems like we have amnesia when we create professional development. There's all this, you would never expect a bunch of first graders to sit there for a lecture, or I don't know, maybe some people do. But then when we go and plan PD, it's like, come lecture for 2 hours and leave.
Yep.
Which I get it. You got it. You have a big schedule, you have a budget, you want to get it done. And you also people have hours that they need to make.
That's true. And then the thing is, of course, we know we can't just sit and get. We know that, but it's still happening in practice. Like I always say, I always like to schedule at least 2 accordion activities, right? Think, pair, share, stop, jot, draw, some type of activities. That and taking things from big picture as opposed to base level.
Yeah.
We know there's so many ways you could teach phonics. You could teach different, but I think understanding, that's one thing I pride myself in. There's always more than one way to do something. And if we work together, I'm pretty sure we can find various ways to do this similar things.
Yeah. When you're thinking about when you're going in and working with the school and figuring out how to support them from just providing professional development, what different models are you using with the way that you deliver your services to make sure that you're meeting everybody's needs and scaffolding?
Sure. So one, I pull data. I ask for data. We usually use their NWEA data to kind of see where they are, because there's always a great picture on, oh, we're doing so great, right? And then there's 2 pieces. There's the data. What does the data show? What are the walls saying? Like, what is the culture in the school? Because you can't suggest certain things if the culture is one way or the other, right? So one of the schools I went to was a Catholic school. So I know already my parameters of supports, right? And so even thinking of that, so culture, the data, and then the third thing is interviews. You have to interview all the people who you're serving, because you want to see what would be a good strategy. You don't want to just go in there and do a strategy without asking people. So I tell them, I ask them 3 questions. I meet with everybody and say, hey, why do you love this place? Like, why do you show up every day? And then they kind of highlight the great things. And I say, if there's, one thing, like magic wand to fix one thing that is really not working in the school, they tell me. And I just take notes, or of course not taking notes, because they're like, am I going to get in trouble? Or and kind of say, if there's the one thing that, you can bring to the school that would make it a better place, what would it be? And then students just, teachers will tell me, like, I would like to have project-based learning. I've been working on it. I really want it into my school. And then, like I said, if you have maybe 5 teachers that want to do project-based learning, you have the foundation for a possible project-based learning school. But like I said, I ask that and I talk to the principal, see what they want, what are their goals, and then I go from there. And then, like I said, I just go from there. We watch the videos, coach cycles, and then feedback and debrief. But yeah, throughout the year, my ultimate goal is, if we have done a good job at Education Innovation 360, then our test scores will go up. It's not something I brag about, but it is what it is. If we're implementing great strategies, then we will see the results in both teacher morale. Teachers will feel better about coming to school. Teacher retention, we've had a 98% teacher retention rate. Teacher effectiveness, efficacy, everybody gets exactly what they want at the same time, and because they're getting what they need, and they're happy to be there because they feel like they're being heard. So I really love what I do, and I enjoy working with people.
It's so interesting how you have these different types of service delivery. So at the beginning, the research, what I would say in the school administrator world is probably called program evaluation, where what's going on. And then you have the training aspect, where here's the information that I'm giving you, which is where most people's professional development pretty much is just the training, which there's that. And then there's the implementation, and then the coaching and the feedback. There's all these different pieces that need to be in place for actually for a change to really happen. And a lot of times when people do professional development for staff, they do one of those things, which is, here's the information. I mean, how do you even know? If I always feel so weird when districts are like, come talk to us, and I have this presentation that I did for this one school, and then I'm going to come in and do this presentation for another school, and I don't really know that much about the district. I mean, yeah, you can talk to the person when they're booking you, but that doesn't really give you an in-depth understanding. And then sometimes you don't hear from them afterwards and you're like,
right?
Was that good? Did you like it?
Right. Well, my feedback form says it was great, but are you going to call me back again? Oh my
Oh,
God.
I
Now
know.
you're getting into the entrepreneurship part of it.
Oh, I know. And then again, like it's so on my end, it's so hard to know and to be like, am I reading into this or are they just really busy, which is probably the case 99% of the time, you know?
Yes, yes. Or like it was one time I did a PD. It was so hot. It was summer, one of the summer PDs. Clearly, I walked in, the teachers looked like they did not want to be there.
Yeah.
And it was like 3 minutes. I was like, hey, how's it going? What's going on? Because I see you guys look like you don't want to be here. Just
Just call it
the
out.
elephant, call it out, and kind of seeing where they were. And they were like, we were supposed to have this day off, but our principals made us come. Now it's like, whoa. So now, how do you serve a group of teachers that really don't want to be there, right? And I think that's a part of the entrepreneurship piece that we have to deal with. What are we going into, and how do we change the dynamic, even though it's, the elephant in this room is saying like, I don't want to be here. So what does that look like? But I think, like you said, it's from the lens of a 1PD training, and that's something we all have to do. So I understand.
Yeah. Oh man, I can just think of so many of those, when it's the beginning of the school year and we're doing PD days and there's some presenter who's clearly really knowledgeable and the teachers are so worried about getting their classroom set up that they can't even concentrate. I remember when I was doing my student teaching placement, well, I guess for me, it was called my clinical externship because that's what we called it in speech pathology. And there was this woman who was presenting on writing, and then all the teachers were sitting there at the table and they're like, she clearly really knows what she's doing, but I don't even have my kids' names on my desks yet. I can't even focus on this right now, and they were kind of like, they kind of felt bad for her because she was put into the situation where nobody's really paying attention to her. And also they're not getting the information that they probably could use in their writing instruction.
Yep. And then, like I said, what happens next? Is the principal going to follow up to see that they're implementing the strategy?
Yeah.
Probably not, right? And so that's another hard piece. Like, you want me to come back, but there's no follow-up. So how do I check to see if this is even a thing that they're doing?
Yeah.
So
I have a hard time with where, if you do offer services in an online format as well, which I know you do that as well, but where from doing that, all the different questions that are going to come up. And there's no way you can get to it in 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 6 hours, even when they have you do a full day long thing, especially when it's those 6 hours. I mean, you're fried after that. And I think about all the questions that are going to come up, and then it almost makes you look bad because they didn't get the results, but there was no way everybody in that situation was not set up for success.
No.
And it's also not really the school leader's fault because they have so many constraints that they're operating under as well.
True. That's true. And then the lonely sped teacher. Like,
yeah. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, wow, and she's like, well, how does this, I'm like, okay, let's just talk personally on that one, because, I'm pretty sure the SPED teacher, all the teachers, they're like, how does this apply to me? What can we do that's, helps me out? Why am I the only person that's attending these mandatory meetings that I'm not getting service? Yeah. So that's another piece to it. So.
Yeah, that is definitely something common that comes up with among the discussions among the related service providers, psychologists, social worker, SLP. Now, and I found with some of the other ones, they're not even really included in the district, like the OTs that just float around. And a lot of times they're like where I was, and I guess it depends on how big the district is. But if you're in a small district, they will hire people from the co-op. So the OT will work from the co-op, or you'll contract them from another district, and they're not even employees. So they just pop in twice a year. They don't even really know what's going on. They're not really a member of the team. And it's that's kind of hard for them to feel included. But yeah, I know the feeling of how does this apply to me? I don't know. I think I would just get so bored that I would always be like, ooh, something different to do today, something new to learn about. That was my mindset. But I get that when you have all these things that you have to worry about and they're throwing another thing at you, it's like, this doesn't seem super relevant. So
yeah, I think another big thing I've seen, it's so funny that, hey, you have this new idea you have to try, but you don't have all the pieces to it.
Oh, yeah.
You're like, what? So I love ideas, and I'm always an advocate of PD, but I'm like, if we don't have all the pieces, then you want us to figure this out anyway? So yeah, that's frustrating for people.
I find that people there's like one of two reactions. There's the deer in headlights, total overwhelm kind of a thing, which I think that sometimes I do that to people unintentionally because I get excited and I start talking about all these different things. Or people get super excited and there's that initial like, I'm going to change the world on Monday and I'm going to try all this stuff. And then they get in there and get busy and they inevitably hit those roadblocks that are totally normal where you would need a person in there to help you and scaffold. And then they get stuck and then they don't implement it once the initial excitement wears off and they go back to their old thing.
There you go.
I was usually in the second group, but occasionally I was in the first group. Depends on the mood.
That is hilarious. You were so right about that. Those are the two. Yep.
Okay. So yes. I know we're getting to the top of the hour. So and I feel like we could keep going on so many different topics. Yes. But where can people learn more about you and the services that you offer?
Sure. So you can go to educationalinnovation360.com. You can Google me. You can find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, anywhere you want. So I am always here. My name is Cassandra Williams. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can connect with me there. I connect with everybody. And I'm just available anytime you guys need me. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for being here. So you offer direct PD for schools, but you also have a program that people can sign up for as well if they want support with literacy.
Yes, if they want one-on-one coaching, I'm your person. But like I said, some teachers the district pays for it, so why not let the district pay for it? So
yeah, I mean, always helps to ask
development
to see if they'll cover at least some of it.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
I really appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
I appreciate you being here. It was fun. So, yeah, thank you so much for being on. Before we wrap up, I wanted to remind you to check the show notes and learn more about where you can connect with Cassandra. Definitely check out her website at educationalinnovation360.com and connect with her on LinkedIn. She has some great articles on her website, and also you can learn more about her professional development programs for schools and individuals. Also, please remember to check out the School of Clinical Leadership if you are a related service provider and you want to take a leadership role in providing executive functioning support for your caseload. To learn more about the School of Clinical Leadership, you're going to want to go to drkarendudek-brannan.com/clinical leadership. If you have an idea for a guest for this show, if you know someone who is providing innovative solutions when it comes to clinical or educational leadership, I'd love to hear your suggestions. Just email me at talktome@drkarenspeech.com if you have a suggestion for a guest on this show, or if you are interested in being a guest. As always, it helps me so much if you leave me a rating or review wherever you listen to your podcasts. So if you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to leave me a review and let me know about it. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.